Welcome to the Language Access Lectern, a PGLS podcast focused on language access in K-12 schools. I'm your host, Mark Byrne.
Thank you and welcome to another session of the Language Access Lectern, a PGLS podcast that celebrates champions for language access all across the United States in K-12 schools. I have a very special guest with us today. Stepping to the lectern for the very first time is Jose Torres. Excited to talk to Jose a little bit about the work that he's doing in terms of building curriculum and content to support language acquisition for English learners, specifically in secondary education. So I know that's a very challenging, challenging opportunity that Jose has taken on. He's a man that enjoys a challenge from what I know about him. So Jose, welcome. Stepping to the lectern for the first time is Jose Torres. Jose, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience?
Well, thank you for having me on your show. First and foremost, I'm a teacher. Spent well over 2 decades working with English learners, especially. I'm originally from South Florida, so the predominant language in South Florida is Spanish, Spanish speakers. And so there was a real need to be part of some kind of program that would help people speak English more fluently. But when I've come to Baltimore, I moved here to Baltimore in 2006 because there was a greater demand for bilingual instructors like myself. And I found myself working in the refugee centers and the community centers and whatnot. And what I found was that there was a lack of real good textbooks and curriculum. And so that's kind of how I ended up on the path that I'm on.
Okay. So you found that there was greater demand up in Baltimore for bilingual educators. Why do you think that is? Like, was it just timing, migratory patterns? Is it, just a greater desire from the communities in Baltimore to support English learners? Or from where you're sitting, what is your take on that?
Well, I think there was just wasn't that many bilingual instructors, up here.
Okay. Okay.
So there might have been a lot of teachers who taught English as a second language, but there weren't a lot of bilingual Spanish fluent speakers who did that. And said in Miami, where I'm from, they're a dime a dozen. So
Okay.
It was just a matter of supply and demand.
Okay. So you decided to leave South Florida for I won't call them greener pastures, maybe colder pastures up there in Baltimore, but you decided to embark on a new career, a new outlet, and here we are 20 years later, and you're still in Baltimore, yeah?
Yeah, well, that's the number one question I always get is like, you're from Miami, why did you move here? It's like the number one question.
Well, I was curious. There's certainly, great opportunities in South Florida within, Florida school systems. So just interesting little tidbit there that you sought opportunity elsewhere. But
I could connect this honestly to my family. I mean, I grew up. I'm from a what's called a migrant family. My parents and my siblings all used to travel. They were farm workers. They were tomato pickers or lime pickers. Whatever was in season. And so, like my family, there's 8 of us, and all of my siblings were born in different states. Different, you could always tell where they were, like wherever my mother was pregnant at the time. Because if somebody was born in the summer, they were probably in the north, and if it was in the winter time birth, they were probably in the south. So my parents would always go where the work was, like wherever. That was instilled in me, I guess, as a child growing up, is that you go where the need is.
That's awesome. I should be more courageous, perhaps. I think that's a very courageous thing to do, right? Put yourself where you're needed. I think so many people, kind of get stuck where they are,
Sure.
Whether it's personally or professionally. So I just find that to be so courageous. And you mentioned that you had 8 siblings.
Well, there's 8 of us. There were 7 siblings. I have a brother who passed away, but there's still the rest of us are still around. And I'm the youngest of the brood, so
Cool.
there was a lot of expectations put on me as a child growing up because nobody in my family graduated high school, let alone college. So growing up, it was always that stigma. It's like, oh, you're just going to be another, farm worker like the rest of your family. But my mother, she instilled in me is like, you're like the last one. You have to finish high school. You have to get an education and not fall into the same thing that we're all doing here, working with our hands, getting dirty and breaking our backs and that sort of thing. So education was instilled in me at a very young age as well. It's like there was that expectation, mostly from my mother, but that carried over into my brothers. And so I share this story with my students because I think a lot of times, when they come to this country or they're from that culture, a lot of times they think that like they're only going to amount to being a cleaner or some kind of landscaper or that sort of thing. And I always try to tell them, well, that was a similar situation that I came up in, but my parent, my mother especially, was like, you can do something more than that, but you need an education. And so like I try to convey that to my students, that like, if you don't throw this opportunity away, there's a bigger world out there.
We're 3 minutes into this podcast. I got chills already hearing you tell that story. So, I just reflect on how awesome these conversations are, and hopefully, they inspire other people the way that they inspire me, because that is a special story. And sometimes, myself and others, we take for granted, the opportunities that we have to push things forward, or, to be the best versions of ourselves. So, it's just great to hear how impactful your family has been in pushing you forward. And, now you're taking those same lessons and you're applying it to your students. And that's just such a special thing.
Well, I think
Um,
going back to your original questions, like why did I move here? And I think our students, and there was a predominantly Hispanic population, needed to see people in positions of like being teachers because that were like them. There's just that old adage about, I want to see somebody who resembles me, and I guess that played a part in it. But more importantly, I think is to build those relationships with the students and not just make it about race or skin color, but more
yeah,
about like making the best out of your opportunities. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, if what I always tell the students, like, nobody really gave me anything. It's like nobody gave
yeah.
me a thing. Even as I speak to you right now, it is a constant struggle, and it's just like that for everyone else. I said, don't expect them, to open up doors for you. You have to seize on opportunities, and if there's none there, you have to make them.
And I think, self belief is a big part of that, right? If you don't believe in yourself, you're going to have a hard time running through that wall that's blocking you, or climbing over the wall, or going around the wall. But, it starts with that self belief, right? So, when you think about those conversations, with some of your siblings, with some of your family, with your mother, for example, what are those things that resonated most with you in terms of creating self belief?
Well, sure, because when you don't have much growing up, you have to make use of what you have around. Like, was very, very poor growing up, so a lot of times the hand-me-downs I got were like from my sibling 3 generations up or whatever. It's like
Yeah.
much older than me, but and you just have to make do with what you have. And like, since we're basically, my families were farmers, we're work laborers in the farm.
Yeah.
But that was the one benefit that we had, is we always had fresh vegetables. We always had fresh fruit in the house. Like, everything that we ate was like, organic, what we would call organic now in the market, but it was all like fresh right from the farm. So we
Right.
would have been poor, but we weren't malnourished by any stretch. You got to make good with what you make use of what you have. And so I try to tell students that, like, okay, so maybe we're not, financially there. Maybe our parents work a lot. Maybe there's all these factors, but what do you have around you? What can these homework assignments, or whatever these projects that are coming, don't turn away from that. Build on that, get something out of it that you're going to be able to hold on to, so when you're older you'll be able to use that, put that as that goes in your toolbox, man.
And language acquisition is a tremendous tool, for anybody, right? But especially for our English learners, to be able to take with them into their careers, into their life beyond education. So, talk to me a little bit about what inspired you to do the work, to put pen to paper, to build a textbook to support, or to help facilitate conversations around language acquisition, for English learners.
Sure, absolutely. Well, like I kind of hinted to this at the beginning is, working in those refugee centers, working for the community college. Um, I was around these students that resembled my parents, so like I saw how they would struggle, and the books that we were using were inadequate, and I'm putting it very kindly. And I remember telling the director of the college where I worked, and I'm like, "Listen, can you get us better books? Because these books are no, they're I hate, I don't mean to sound rude, but they're no good. They're not really serving. They don't they don't target the language skills that they need at the very very basic level. Talk about like phonics and stuff."
Yeah.
And he jokingly said, and I love telling this part of the story. He's like, he kind of joked about it. He's like, "Well, if you don't like these books, then make your own." Right. So it was just kind of like, because we're like, he's
Careful who you say that to, right?
he didn't even think about it. It was just like it's just a smart like remark that, because we had that kind of rapport. But I went home. I'm not gonna lie. I went home and I thought about this. Like, you know what? Maybe I will make my own book. But I didn't know the first thing about writing a textbook. I've used them as a teacher, but I never knew how to actually make one. And
Yeah. Now that's interesting.
oh yeah, so like looking at some of the, so I said, well, let me look at the books that I do have. And so I'm looking at these books and I'm going through the scope and sequence. I'm looking at the references, when you pull in the back and it's got all those like cited works.
Yeah, citations for sure.
It's like tons and tons of stuff. I'm like, well, I was very intimidated by that.
Yeah.
But I went to my college professor, who incidentally is now the TESOL president, TESOL International president, Dr. Deborah Suarez. She was
No kidding.
my professor in college. And
All right.
my master's. And I remember asking her like just general questions about what do I need to do. She was probably busy with a lot of things, but she had mentioned something about, what you got to do is you got to do some research. I think it was very general. I'm like, well, research. Well, how do I do that? So I got into the whole idea of build. You have to like have a hypothesis. There's got to be a goal in mind. You got to find something out. So what I wanted to find out in the early stages was, what could I target to help these people learn English better? Like let's have that real serious conversation. And what I started to parse in all of this, just the observations, was um they needed to have greater phonemic awareness. They needed to have greater phonological awareness. They needed these things that we look at with elementary kids, with the babies when they're doing, foundations, right? But adults don't want to work with, the duck and all these other, words that were for children. They're meant for children.
Yeah.
And I found I hit a brick wall. I'm like, well, there's nothing I can grab that is appropriate for adults.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I'm gonna have to create it. And so I started experimenting with different things that would get their attention and keep their attention. So I started the work on phonics with them, but it took a while.
Can I ask a quick question? So when you present elementary phonics to adults or secondary students who are, trying to work on their English language skills, like what is the reaction to that? When you show the picture of the duck, right? Like, is it deflating for them, or is it does it make them feel like not good about themselves, or
cringe, man? It was
it's cringe.
Yeah. They didn't particularly like it, and
Yeah.
I was insulting them. And so I'm like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not going to expose you to the stuff that's meant for children. And so I started to build things with like images of photographs. I would grab whatever's on public domain, or grab something from my book, that maybe I didn't have permission for, but I just for the worksheet. We all do that as teachers. We're talking very early on. And what I found was the more I used these visuals that were, pictures of Michael Jackson or pictures of people that were famous, and using that kind of stuff, I noticed that their reactions they were starting to get more engaged. And so as I started building these activities that were phonics based, and I tried different versions of them, and I tried them with different groups, and I asked them afterwards, well, did you like this one? And I give them an option. I give them two. I was like, this is the same worksheet, the same thing we're gonna do, but I'm gonna give you two different worksheets. Which one do you like more? And this went
Okay.
for years. Okay.
Oh, wow.
For years until I figured out, okay, I had collected a series of activities that were showing promise, that I had gone over this with hundreds of students, and they all, this is the ones that they like the most.
That's good.
I started piecing this stuff together, and then I began like collecting all that data based on this, collecting data. And the data was always linked to assessment scores.
Okay.
Because the college, like most places that are federally funded, they have to meet certain criteria that is linked to an assessment, a standardized assessment that has nothing to do with my class. So it's not like I could fudge the numbers. It's not like I could manipulate it. I wasn't
Sure.
even in the room with them. So,
And you're talking about college
yeah,
level students?
the CASA's test is an adult assessment that students would take, which
Gotcha.
test their proficiency skills, right, in language.
Okay.
These are standardized assessments that the college has to have produce these numbers so that they can get funding from the government.
Yeah, for sure. Makes sense.
That's how when I went back to that original director at the beginning that I was telling you about, where he said, well, if you don't like these books, make your own. You know, by this time, he already knows what I'm doing. He gave me permission to do it. He was supporting me. He's been a very, very staunch supporter of mine from those days. And he went on to become like the director of the labor department here in the state of Maryland. He's kind of a bigwig now.
Oh, wow. Well, hopefully he
yeah.
doesn't forget his people.
No, he doesn't.
Good man.
I find ways to get in touch with him.
Good.
I'll probably share this video when you put it out. I'll probably share
Absolutely. Yeah.
it. He knows that I give him credit for a lot of that because I wouldn't have been able to do it without him.
Great leaders empower their people to make change. So
I have nothing
he
but
did that.
man. That man helped me in my career. But
And
anyway,
how many kids now, right? So I mean, that's inspiring as well. I mean, so many English learners benefit from him giving you the freedom to figure it out,
yes,
right? So that's cool.
it wasn't like all like, oh, you know, he was my buddy or anything like that. It was more like I was showing him promise. I was showing him results. And
Yeah.
as long as I was going down that trajectory of going positive results, he was going to continue to have my back on it. And sure enough, man, when we compared those data numbers with, you know, and I had sample groups, this group of students had the work that we did with phonics, this group of students did not. And you could see a difference. You could, I mean, it was
Awesome.
19.
And then, of course, you just had them randomized samples, or, you know, how did you
Yes.
decide which students would be guinea pigs?
Yeah, it's completely legit, and it wasn't just me. I had recruited other instructors to help with this process. They all showed gains as well. It was the college was sold on it. They're like, "This is fantastic. You've solved one of the big riddles that we have." And so I presented this. Here's where it gets really interesting. I presented my data to the TESOL organization, the affiliate here in Maryland, who at the time, my professor, who's now the president of TESOL International, was on the board here in Maryland still. She was another one who by this time is supporting me and she was very in my ear about things. I submitted my work to the Maryland TESOL organization. They reviewed it. They acknowledged its legitimacy, and they awarded me what's called an achievement grant to publish this as a textbook.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it wasn't like I showed up with a textbook and say, hey, look, I wrote this on my own. They said, here's some money, put it and make it into a book.
And how many were you able to print off the back? Or
I mean,
like, what does the business of textbook publishing look like? I'm completely ignorant to this. So, you know,
I was too. I was
oh, of course. Right.
You know, like, so the college, the original college said, look, I showed them a prototype of the book, and they're like, yes, let's sign me up. And well, they bought X amount of books. They bought hundreds and hundreds of these things, right?
Yeah. Well, what does the prototype look like? Let's go a little slower through this. So what does the prototype actually physically look like? How many pages?
Okay, well, the prototype was It was originally just all the sheets that I would have that would go into a book was in a binder, like a three-ring binder, like you would see like in an office. I showed that to them. We used that initially in like the later trials. And then I went to Amazon and said, I want to publish this like a self-published book so that I can see what it really looks like as a book.
Okay.
And that's the prototype book that I'm telling you that I went to the college with and said, this is the book. This is the culmination, the results of all those years that we did all this stuff in here. And they're like, yeah, let's do it. And so the college that supported me throughout this entire process was my first client. And they bought, I don't know how many, I forget how many hundreds of books that they bought, which was a really nice payday for me. It was one of the best ones, you know? So
I remember textbooks aren't cheap. So
yeah.
that's one of the things that I certainly remember about college.
Well, I gave them a nice little discount because of course they were on my side the whole time. But
Sure.
the getting was really good in the early days with that college. Yes, it was.
Okay, that's awesome. And then how many versions of the textbook have you produced over the years?
Well,
Is there an evolution?
let's just talk about the timeline, okay? Because this was 2016. So this was a very nice gravy train that I was writing for a couple of years, right? And then
Okay.
happened in 2019, 2020.
COVID pandemic?
COVID hit, right?
Okay.
So I was soaring like this, and then COVID hit and poof, went straight down, just like everyone else. Everything stopped. Everything hit rock bottom. And we had to, when I say we, I mean as instructors, as teachers, we had to evolve the whole what we were doing. And everything went to a virtual. Everything became online. Everything became more online. Virtual became a bigger part. It still is, I think, now a part of the education world.
Yeah.
So
do you think that can be a positive? I mean, of course, I understand that, education was certainly impacted by the pandemic, but do you think that there are silver linings to that, or can we extract a positive from our experience with COVID, do you think, or is
yeah,
that just
because
time that was lost?
well, remember what I was telling you earlier when I was a kid, you had to make use of what you had. And this is an ongoing theme that I share with my students. You got to make use of the things you have, the tools you have with you, what you have around you. And with COVID, that whole pandemic era of us having to rely on virtual classes and doing things online changed the game, because as time went on, that the old way of doing, the more analog way of doing stuff, the first edition book, which was great for its run, I found did not fit in this new online world.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I had to create, so I have a second edition. And then the second edition of the book, I took time because, I take years to do these things, man. It doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah. Nothing good does.
I had to figure out how can I incorporate what we have in the dependency with virtual learning into this textbook for English learners. And what I decided what was the best thing to do is to create a video component that goes with it. And so like all the major activities in this textbook have video components. They each have their own individual QR code on the pages. So like if a student is on this page and is doing this activity, wants to practice the pronunciation, or there's a sentence or a conversation or whatever, they use their cell phones or smartphones. They use that camera. They get that QR code. It takes them right to the video, and they can practice. For teachers, they don't have to sit there and try to find a website or a link. They can just use that QR code, go right to it, and go to the lesson. So teachers that are using this textbook now all across the country, they love the fact that it's convenient, that it's easy to find. Nothing is hidden. There's no you have to go buy a CD or that stuff. You don't have to pay.
Nice.
Or you gotta pay for access. None of that. You just buy the book, and everything is in there, and you can find it all online. And when you're done with it, the students can practice it at home. It's worked out really well so far.
That's awesome. And so how many years did it take you to get to that online version of the textbook? And who partners with you to do that kind of work?
No, I do everything myself. I mean,
wow.
I put everything together. Now I have support, of course, like people that I work with, other instructors. I will give prototypes to other people to try out with their students, and they give me feedback. How did it go? Give me some data to work with, so to make sure I'm doing this right.
Yeah.
So I didn't get started on this until, let's see, things started subsiding with the pandemic. What, 2021? 2021 it started lightening up. We went back to the classrooms.
Yep. Yep.
And I put out the second edition in 2024. So it took me about 2-3 years.
Okay.
But
adoption is still great, and this is the type of learning that students gravitate towards, in addition to having a written text.
Yes. So yeah, it's one of those things that I find that students are just like, if they have certain particular difficulties with certain aspects of like pronunciation, or there's certain phonics pieces that they just need to practice on more. When they're on their lunch break, or when they're at home, or when they're whatever, they can access it online and they can practice it on their own. And I encourage them as many times as possible, so that as we move along in the coursework, these things they can get caught up, because I know that they hit these snags, right? And they feel like the whole class is moving and leaving them behind. Now with these QR codes, with these online videos, they don't have to feel like they're falling behind. Like, they can always go back and keep working on things that they need to work on.
That's awesome. Let me ask, what would the most inspiring piece of feedback be that you've gotten over the years?
Oh man. Whew.
I knew that would be a tough one.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Just that from teachers who are using the book, say that it's refreshing to work with materials created by a teacher who's actually using their own materials. Because a lot of times as teachers, we get handed these books and materials from higher ups who probably haven't sniffed a classroom in 20 years. They have some fancy office job, and they don't really know what it is that they're pushing on us. And they're just looking at, contracts with these big publishers. But, I'm just a little guy. I'm a teacher. I'm a working teacher. Like, I'm in the classroom every single day. And so when I hear from other teachers, it's nice to know that I'm working with a book that's written by a guy who's using the exact same book I'm using every single day.
Do you have like any groups that you've started to, bring some of these folks together so that you guys could talk more, I don't know, candidly about how you're using the textbook, or, provide, some professional learning opportunities for staff? Is that something that you do?
Oh yeah, I have. There are certain people that will contact me, and sometimes I'll do virtual trainings with them. I've been known to fly out to different states to, meet up with groups, at a conference, or, here locally, even within this area. Because I'm close to DC, I'm close to Virginia, I'm close to New Jersey, so I'm really within driving distance to a lot of these places where I can do, workshops and that sort of thing. So I provide as much support as I can physically, because I do have a regular teaching job like everyone else. I got students, I got classrooms that I got to do. But I try to make myself as available as possible. My wife, she's been a great supporter, and she's like, understands. Sometimes I just have to take a trip,
Yeah. Behind every great man is a great woman, right? Tell me a little bit about the support that she provides, and letting you, fly out of the nest to, go ahead and share information about, the book that you're providing. Tell me a little bit about your wife.
She doesn't always like it. She doesn't always like it. But at the end of the day, it's going to help us in the family. So I do.
Okay. Yeah, my wife is similar. I was at the NABE conference just last week, and we got a 2-month-old at home, but duty calls, and we got to hop out of the nest and do what we got to do to, continue to promote language access across the country, because, it's an important component of supporting English learners, and work that I'm proud to do. So when you get an opportunity to go out there and, rub elbows with, people who are making real change day to day, can't turn down those opportunities. Let me ask you, Jose, what conferences do you like attending?
So last year I was out in the Midwest. I went to Omaha, Nebraska. I was out there for the Mid ESOL conference. I also went to Minnesota. I went out to the Minnesota conference, which they call MELED, I think. This year, I'm slated to go to the ESOL here in DC. Because last year I went to a different DC conference, which was called, I forget what it was called exactly, OEEO or something like that. It was a free one, rare. You never get free conferences, but
Yeah.
that free one that I went to the DC was a real banger, man. It was great. Met some real great people, networked with people. Ultimately, I actually met some people there that would later book me for a workshop in Baltimore City a few months later, which was a nice payday for me as well. But it isn't that one was, and a lot of these aren't necessarily for the money. Like I really want to teach them how to make this work, you know. But
Yeah.
let's be realistic. I mean, this is a business, and it takes time out of my work schedule, and I don't ask for a tremendous amount just to be compensated, but it's more about spreading this out there because everybody else is doing who's doing this are probably getting, like you said, making big change, and they don't go back to the classroom. You know, they don't have a classroom to go back to.
That's
So
right.
I'm, taking time out of pulling time away from my students to do this, um, because it's something that's extremely important. If we're gonna make this field better, if we're gonna really seriously have that conversation about what we need to do to help English learners improve their language skills and get to the next level, then we need to work with people who are actually in the trenches, teachers who are actually innovative like myself. There's lots of people like me that are out there that just don't have any support. We
Yeah.
got to find that voice and give them a platform because these are the kinds of people that are going to change the field. They're the innovators, the ones that are going to bring it to the next stage.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you got to get out there. You got to see people, grip and grin, make those connections,
Yep.
and then the results, of course, they'll speak for themselves. So, um, talk to me a little bit about you know family, where we're at now. How does your family feel about the work that you're doing? And then, what do those conversations look like when you're sitting around the Christmas table and, you're reflecting back on your childhood with your siblings and, the work that you're doing? I mean, they got to think it's pretty cool, right?
Oh yeah. Well, my mother passed away about 7, 8 years ago, but before she left, um, let's see, where are we? We're in 2025, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So oh geez, man, time flies, doesn't it? Yeah, it's
Yes.
about 8 years ago, maybe seven, no, about 7 years ago. My mother passed, but before she did, um, when I put that first edition out, I gave her a copy, and she was really
That's cool.
proud. She was happy about it. She's like, "You did it, son. You made something special," and she was very proud about it. And she was telling the whole world,
As she should be.
um, And I think
She'd
before
be
she,
your number one sales rep, no doubt about it.
my mom, I dedicated the book to her and my father, because you know they always struggled with English. Like and even to her final day, she's like, "I wish I had learned English better." And I said, like, "Mom, I wish I had written this book for you,
You
earlier."
did.
But
You did.
I
You
choked
wrote
up.
it for her. Yeah. It's tough to lose a family member. I lost my mother-in-law about a month ago, just over a month ago. And I don't know if it ever gets easier, losing a loved one like that. But, hopefully I do the type of work that it's, makes these people smile from beyond the grave. And, certainly, doing right by people, especially those people that, might not necessarily have the tools to advocate for themselves. I think it's really powerful work. And,
Yeah,
I certainly feel, and I've always felt, very privileged to do the work that I'm doing. And, of course, I can appreciate that you feel the same way too. So I'm glad that your mom got a copy of that book before she
she,
passed.
oh yeah, she took that with her, man. So it's my siblings are equally, um, they seen that they've seen me progress over the years, and I have a very close relationship with like my oldest sister and my brother.
Yeah.
A couple of my other brothers they kind of float around a lot, man. I don't really catch up with them very often, but when we do, it's always a good time. My wife is just basically just me and my wife. My kids are older. My son's 30 now. It's gonna be 30. He's working in the medical field. He's very happy there. My
Nice.
daughter my daughter's joining the ranks as an educator. She's in college, going to college to be a teacher as well.
She'll
So
teach. Okay. Very cool.
a teacher like her mother is a teacher as well. So I mean, home for me is just me and my wife, and like I always tease her, like, you met me. When you met me and you started dating me, I stayed up late at night working on stuff, working on books, working on stuff. I'm a writer. It's that part of me is just not going to change. So yeah, maybe sometimes she gets a little annoyed that I'm up late at night working on stuff, but by this point, I think she's used to it, and she knows that there's always something good that's going to come of it. So I got a lot of support at home.
Oh, that's nice. And the proof's in the pudding, right? You've produced great content and you're getting great feedback from the community of teachers that you guys work with. So that's incredible. Jose, I think your story offers a lot of inspiration to those classroom teachers who want to take on a challenge that think they can do it better than the textbook publishing companies. And I think that's a really, I don't think it's unique necessarily, but I think it's unique that you had the courage to persist and produce something that is, so well received and is making such an incredible impact. And I know you got to get to class. So I want you to just leave one last thought for those educators out there who think that they or who would be inspired to put their spin on it, but maybe don't know how to get started, or, what kind of message would you put out there for the teachers in the classrooms who are, eager to create content or eager to, inspire others who do? Talk to me for just a minute about that, and I'll let you get back to class. And thank you for everything today. But I want that one more message to go out to those teachers. So you tell me.
I would encourage people to go to the website Teachers Pay Teachers. I'm not in. I mean, I do have a little storefront there. I don't really do very much on there, but and it's not an endorsement or anything like that. But if you go to teacherspayteachers.com, there's an ocean of content being produced by teachers just like the rest of us. So maybe you may not want to maybe your ambition is not to make a textbook. Maybe your ambition is to just make materials that teachers can use that are practical, that are good. Maybe you already have things in your toolbox that you want to maybe make a few bucks on. I suggest go to Teachers Pay Teachers, see what other teachers are doing. Maybe you're already on there using and downloading stuff, paying like $4, $3 here, $3 there. It's just another way to build residual income as teachers, because we need that. But it's also it could get your foot going in the right direction if this is what you want to do, creating content. It like you can do something like what I did, which is pretty ambitious and take years and years and years, or you can do something that you already know is practical and it already functions, and you could sell it on Teachers Pay Teachers. You could sell it on Amazon. It just takes a lot of work promoting it, and that's not easy. So if you think this is like going to be easy, it's not going to be easy. But if you have a good product, it is easier. I'll leave it at that.
That's right. And then tie it to the data, of course, right? Just like you did early on. And then, you built your champions and off we go.
Yes, if you have nice data to go with your product, I mean, that's probably what's going to get you in the door on district level, because that's what's gotten me in the door. Is I show them the proof. And incidentally, if I could share one last thing with you, I
Please.
I did write a research report, a journal type report based on the data that we collected over the years tied to this textbook. And I just got notification this past week that it will be published in the Journal for English Learners from the University of Central Florida. So it's going into a scholarly journal. My work is finally going to be in a true journal that people will be able to cite.
All right. Now we're talking. Congrats.
And that is, thank you. And that is, I haven't announced it anywhere else. You got it first.
Oh my goodness. Now we're talking.
Yes, we got. I mean, it's accepted. I just got to do a couple little revisions here and there, but it is in like Flynn, and this is going to put my name up there with all the other people that we quote when we do cited work and research. That to me blows my mind. It blows my mind that there's somebody out there referencing my work and putting it in their dissertations or something. Who knows?
Well, it won't be the last time, that's for sure. So thank you again for everything today, Jose. I appreciate you. Thank you for sharing your story. Certainly, very inspiring, to myself, but also so many of our listeners. I'm sure multilingual teachers across the country would certainly benefit from hearing more about your story. I know you're not going anywhere. I know you're going to continue to make waves in this space. So hopefully we get a chance to rub elbows again here soon. But again, thank you for so much for not only the time today, but the work you're doing to support bilingual education in this country. It's inspiring, to hear your story, but then also to get to share some time with you and learn about, the process. And I certainly learned a lot today. So thank you for that. Continue to do great work with those kids there in Baltimore. And thank you so much.
Can I return the favor and invite you onto my YouTube channel show? I want to teach English. Could I maybe extend that and have you on my show?
That would be cool. Yeah, I accept. That'd be lovely. You let me know when and where, and I'll show up.
Continue this conversation.
We can. Yeah, it's fun. I'm absolutely, willing to do that anytime. And, if there's, some questions that I can prepare ahead of time or some, some information that I can provide or some talk tracks that, I could go down with you, I would love to do that. So thank you for that invitation. That's wonderful. Thanks.
We'll do it. We'll do it. That's awesome. I can't wait. I won't be in my car next time. I promise you that.
Oh, I might be. So who knows? But thank you. Thank you for joining us today. That's amazing. And thank you for that lovely invitation. I would love to do that with you. That'd be a lot of fun.
Thank you for having me. I really do appreciate it.